ordinance and legislation will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilor Dion. Councilor Liberty. Councilor Reposo.
Here.
Councilor Washington.
Here.
Chair Kadim.
Here. Before I make the statement, so Councilor Dion is running a little bit late. She will be joining us, and then Councilor Liberty is out sick. So it'll be the three of us, and then once Michelle gets back, it'll be four. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed acknowledgeable and permissible. First item on the agenda is citizen input. Are there any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none, the second item, oh, I'm sorry. Yep. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
Sean Simpson. Sean Simpson, 323 Anthony Street, Fall River, Mass.
Great.
The principal of the Laterno Elementary School, just here on behalf of the Laterno Committee. I know one of the ordinances that is up for tonight is to make Anthony Street a one-way down to Lamphor. I just want to thank publicly all the folks that were involved in presenting this, and as the head of the Laterno school community, just want to say that we're all in favor for this.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. I drive that neighborhood, so I catch some of that traffic, so I can feel the pain. Are there any more individuals who'd like to speak? Seeing none. Item number 2 is minutes from August 29th, 2022.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve made by Councilor Reposo. Is there a second by Councilor Washington? Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 3 is proposed ordinances. Traffic handicap parking was referred to the committee on September 13th and then October 11th of 2022. Handicap parking for Bates Street, Birch Street, Dwelly Street, Hafford Street, Locust Street, and Bay Street. Is there a motion for emergency preamble?
Motion so made.
Motion was made by Councilor Reposo, second by Councilor Washington. Roll call.
Councilor Dion. Councilor Liberty. Councilor Reposo.
Yes.
Councilor Washington.
Yes.
Chair Kadim.
Yes. Is there any discussion? Do we need the administration down? Discuss anyone? No. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion so made.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Reposo, second by Councilor Washington. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Motion carries. Item number 4, we've got proposed ordinances. This is going to be traffic miscellaneous referred. These items were referred to the committee on September 13th, September 27th, and then October 11th. Section 1 is a left turn prohibited or restricted at certain intersections from Lamport Street to Newark Street. Section 2, left turn only intersections, Anthony Street westerly, northbound drivers exiting Laterno School. Section 3, stop intersection designated. That's going to be striking out Anthony Street eastbound at the intersection of Stafford Road, North Farley Street northbound, and intersection of Locust Street. Section 4 is the stop intersections designated. Newark Street southbound at the intersection of Anthony Street, North Varley Street southbound at the intersection of Pine Street. Section 5, we have one-way streets designated, striking out North Varley Street, northerly from Pine Street to Locust Street. And then we have Section 6, one-way streets designated, Anthony Street, westerly from Stafford Road to Lamport Street, North Varley Street, southerly from Locust Street to Pine Street. Section 7, we have parking prohibited at all times, Lamport Street east side from the corner of Anthony Street for a distance of 40 feet northerly. We have Lamport Street west side from the corner of Anthony Street for the distance of 40 feet northerly. Newark Street east side from the corner of Anthony Street for a distance of 40 feet northerly. Newark Street west side from the corner of Anthony Street for a distance of 40 feet northerly. And then we have Section 8, handicap parking removals for 3rd Street, Grove Street, and North Main Street. Any discussion on any of these items? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve was made for first reading, was made by Counselor Reposo, second by Counselor Washington. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So voted, motion carries unanimously. Item number 5 is a resolution. Committee on Ordinance and Legislation meet to discuss current graffiti ordinance. This was referred to the committee on June 14th of 2022. I'll ask the administration to come down. I'll turn it over to the filer of the resolution, Counselor Reposo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we're just here to discuss. It's the suit.
Wow.
The shoes.
It's the shoes.
It's the orange. So we're here to discuss the current graffiti ordinance and what we can do to change it a little bit with the pending arrival of the graffiti machines that we purchased using the Bristol County ARPA money. So, City Administrator, hello. Hello, sir, how are you? Good, how are you today? Nice to see you. So, we have a set of proposed changes, and they're not massive. Seth, I don't know if you want to explain kind of the rationale a little bit behind it, because we did work together on this.
Sure. So, thank you for having me. So as you know, Chapter 46, Section 15 of the ordinances already has a graffiti ordinance in place. Councilor Reposo took note of the fact that there are aspects of the ordinance that really just aren't as effective as they could be. Some things really give a property owner too little time to respond. I think the idea being that if we're gonna hold a property owner responsible for removing graffiti, we should give them adequate time to do that. And then also give the city kind of an automatic license after such time has elapsed to be able to take action and use our resources to remove that graffiti if the property owner refuses to do so. So the significant additions here are that it's a change in subsection C, subsection D, paragraph 1, gives a private property owner 2 weeks rather than the original 48 hours to remove graffiti. And then the Department of Inspectional Services, and that could be building inspector as well as minimum housing, could cite a private property owner for not removing graffiti within 2 weeks after sufficient notice. And in the event that after sufficient notice in the 2 weeks and monitoring of reports of graffiti needing to be removed, if it doesn't happen, that graffiti can be removed by the city at the cost of the property owner without the city incurring liability. As it stands right now, there are certainly a number of privately owned buildings where there is graffiti. It would be in the interest of the city to be able to, and frankly, the interest of the neighbors and the neighborhoods to be able to remove that graffiti, but obviously going on private property without notice and without consent certainly opens the city to liability, and it amounts to a trespass. So this creates an avenue by which the city can remove graffiti after appropriate notice and opportunity for the property owner to do so. And then finally, in the final change, also subsection D, this time paragraph C. I'm sorry, it's a subparagraph. That the cost of removal shall be based upon the actual cost of material, labor, and other terms which will be charged according to the current collective bargaining agreement. So it basically allows us to charge based upon who does the work within community maintenance, based upon how they're paid under the collective bargaining agreement. So the idea here is that we can recoup our costs, hold private property owners accountable for removing graffiti, and I think it strengthens the ordinance considerably. Thank you.
Any discussion?
I have a question. Is this for commercial, private owners, and residential, or both?
So the ordinance as it stands right now, and also with the changes, is kind of silent as to whether or not that's residential or commercial. In terms of the city's right to remove graffiti, obviously on our own buildings, we have not only a right but a responsibility to maintain those buildings and remove those. With regard to private property, I'm not sure that it really matters whether it's commercial or residential.
So I guess my only thought is that, like, so some of the, like, residential properties that get tagged, like maybe their garage or something that gets tagged, I just wonder about the costs associated with that. Like, what if they can't afford in 2 weeks' time to remove that? You know, is the city prepared to, how long does it take? They'll remove it for them and give them a substantial amount of time to, like, pay that back, or, you know, not to get fined, have to find if someone tagged their property, they've owned that property for a long time, and it's not their fault, but they don't have the means. So I'm just thinking about that, instead of, like, you know, these big companies that own these big buildings that can afford and pay that right out.
So I think the tough part, and obviously, you know, I'm not the legislative body, right? I'm just, you know, we're the administration. So in terms of enforcement, which would be where it would fall to us, I think that, you know, where you're really gonna see this ordinance come into play is buildings in highly visible areas, which sort of amounts to commercial buildings, likely more than residential. I think in general, there's a lot of areas in the city where the onus does fall on a residential owner or an owner of a residential property to do certain things. And I think the city always tries to work with people.
Okay.
You know, and I think the best example of that is trash. You know, when folks don't necessarily separate or do whatever it is that we need them to do in order to reduce our contamination and all the things that we need to do you know, we try to work with folks. You know, there's warnings, there's opportunities to you know, to do what needs to be done. I think this would be very similar, and we can certainly write something in that gives some level of grace to residential owners. I think that
Just
certainly
thinking about someone
understand.
that, you know, owned an elderly couple that's owned it for a long time, they can't get out there, you know, just,
Actually, I apologize. I volunteered that we could make changes. Again, not the legislative body, but I could certainly see if this body were to want to make a change that would add in the opportunity for residential folks to either have more time or
I don't
enter
think
into some
time,
sort
I
of
think,
agreement.
my thought is like a waiver or something, some type of waiver, like you know, they're on a fixed income, they own this property, they can't get out there. I'm just kind of thinking about properties down the Columbia Street area, that have been probably tagged and they just can't afford to take care of it, you know, so.
But then I think that, you know, that does raise the question of, you know, what about, you know, absentee landlords, you know, where.
Right,
you know,
it
you have
goes like,
multifamilies.
you're right, it opens up, I just thinking about our poor little people that, you know, can't,
Absolutely.
you know, so. I'll yield, just my thoughts, I'll yield too.
Thank you. Counselor Dan?
Yeah, I just have one question. I know normally we have no jurisdiction or ability to do anything with state property, but will we be able to use these graffiti machines on overpasses and things like that?
So, just like, you know, cleaning debris off the side of state property, I mean, there's a process we go through to try to get permission to do what we need to do. I think this would be very similar. You know, if there is graffiti on overpasses and it's, you know, clearly, you know, an eyesore to the residents that live there and the state may not even know about it, we would go through a process to get permission to remove that and then go forward and do it.
Because, yeah, obviously, not only is it an eyesore, but that's the first thing somebody sees when they enter the city. Not a good way to enter the city.
Right.
With that, I yield. Thank you.
Counselor Reposo?
Yeah, just to Counselor Washington's point, I think the intention of this was it's mainly of the commercial buildings,
Yeah.
because that's what we normally see. I use Pleasant Street as a perfect example. You know, all down those storefronts, Lafayette Park, that little hut there in the middle of the field is tagged with everything. So I think the idea was to try to deal with those situations more, but I don't disagree with you in the sense of what do we do with a residential property? You know, we could possibly look at some language or, you know, either more time or, again, I think the intention, and Seth and I talked about this, was to try to build a relationship and a collaboration between the property owner and the city. Because if a property owner doesn't have the ability to do it, other than slap some paint on it, the city has the resources to then remedy it. But then there'd have to be some sort of agreement of how we pay for that.
Yeah.
But I think working together is kind of what we're aiming for this. Where if you look at the ordinance as it stands currently, you know, 48 hours is a very, very short period of time, especially if it just happened to you. And I think the deputy chief is here as well. So in the situation of a person who does it and then is caught, then I think that changes the situation a little bit. Of, person tags a building, gets arrested for it, how is that compensation gonna be taking place? It'd essentially be the person who did it, or would have to, maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yes, I mean, I think the ordinance here talks about the person who did the graffiti being responsible for payment. And I can tell you that I've done several graffiti investigations as a patrolman, and the court does order restitution to property owners. I would also say that anecdotally, and obviously not a guarantee, but in most cases where we find graffiti being left is on the commercial buildings. Generally residents, homeowners, they want it gone because it's an eyesore and they take care of it, so. Obviously not in all cases, but I think that might alleviate some concerns. Anecdotally, the majority of the lingering graffiti is on absentee
Big buildings.
landlord properties and commercial properties.
So, I yield, thank you.
Thank you. So the only question I have is just, I guess in section 3, so I don't know if section B speaks to it. I'm just not familiar with 139, section 3A. But the costs that are gonna be, if the city is doing the work, the charges that are gonna be charged off to either the commercial owner or the residential owner, is it gonna be liened if they don't pay for it? So it's gonna be part of their tax lien?
Theoretically, it could. I mean, really, anything in ordinance that creates a financial obligation for the homeowner could be liened. I think my preference would be to try to work with the homeowner. before we
Yeah,
get to
I guess I'm just getting to a point if they refuse to pay after we've gone out and if it's especially if we get a commercial property that's got significant graffiti, right? So I think if you're looking at one tag or if you're looking at the entire side of the building, that could be a lot of manpower and hours associated with that, so,
Yeah, there's certainly the opportunity to do that.
okay.
Because, as long as this is an ordinance, then, it carries with it that ability.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Is there a motion on the table?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve was made by Council Dion, seconded by Council Reposo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted, motion carries. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item number 6 is a proposed ordinance salary schedule for the Director of Fall River Emergency Management Agency, referred on September 27th, 2022. Is there any discussion? Do you want to just quickly speak over?
Director Aguirre, who's the Director of Emergency Management, as we know, does a really exceptional job. He does the job that many communities pay a full-time person much more than we pay Director Aguirre. And frankly, I think that the volunteer group that he's put together and that he trains and then he maintains and the equipment that he gets mostly through grants really stacks up pretty well against pretty much any community. The reason why this increase could not have gone through when we were doing this previously is that his position and his work falls under an entirely different chapter. And so while the positions that were either out of ordinance and that we were trying to bring either within ordinance or make per contract, they all fell within the same section of our ordinances. Director Aguirre was separate. I don't think we realized that in time, so this is a way to correct that and get him paid. Certainly more than he's getting paid now and probably less than he deserves, so.
And we're just looking to go from 22.5 to 25,000.
It's a small jump, but at this point, we're capped by ordinance.
Council Dion?
So, what would we need to do to put this under the EMS department? It doesn't seem to me to make sense to have it separate. I mean, the work they do, they show up to all the fires, all the disasters. Somehow it doesn't make sense to me that it falls in the category that it's in, so that would be my first question. Secondly, roughly, how many hours does he work? 'Cause I get it's sometimes this many, sometimes that many, but if we could, because I believe he puts in more hours than people realize he puts in.
No doubt about it. Yep.
And I guess what I'm getting at, I know, of all people, I'm the last one, and I don't say it often. I don't think this is even enough for what he does and what he's done and what he's turned this emergency management agency into. Now, it's funny that would be out of ordinance to increase it. Maybe that's something that needs to be worked on. So basically, those are my first two initial comments.
Sure. To answer the first question, which I think was, why is it the way it is? Part of it is that he doesn't just serve the fire department or just serve EMS. You know, in a mass casualty or decon event or something like that, he has equipment that he would use that would support EMS. He has other equipment he would use that would support fire. Obviously, the majority of his work is with fire. Part of the director's time is also spent within fire, doing other special services work apart from the EMA. So his job and his pay is kind of bifurcated. But the way it's set up, not that this is how it's always been is ever a good answer, but that's why it is what it is, and we can certainly look at if there's better ways to orient his position and his team of volunteers as well as his resources. We could certainly look at that. It's not something we've looked at recently.
Yeah, because, everybody knows, I've been a strong advocate for political appointments and how much money they make and whether there should be a cap or not be a cap. I find it interesting that he falls in a category of schedule for political appointments and board committees. People who have positions that are political appointments don't fall under this. I just kind of have a hard time with that. You have, and it's not, again, not the person, because I don't care who the person is. I truly don't. They come and go with every mayor. I don't care who the person is. But we have, people in political position making $40,000, and this man is going to make at best $25,000. Again, I go back to, I don't think it's fair. It's not the inequity. It just bothers me when I see this kind of thing. And with that, I'll yield.
Any other further discussion? Councilor Reposo.
Just a quick question. I know it's dated 7/1, so is this going to be retroactive if this goes through?
Yes.
Okay, I yield. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion approved was made by Councilor Dion, seconded by Councilor Reposo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Seeing no other business before us, there
Motion to adjourn?
motion adjourned made by Councilor Reposo.
Second.
Second.
By Councilor Washington. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Motion carries. Committee on Ordinance and Legislation is now adjourned.